slavery. Those kind of laws, obviously, I would fight to uphold the Constitution of the United States, because I'll take a dual oath when sworn in, to uphold the laws and the Constitution of the state of Nevada, but also of the United States. And it's incumbent upon an Attorney General to show that kind of leadership, show that kind of legal analytical skills, to be able to step up as a leader when those types of situations arise and challenge those unconstitutional statutes.
This question first to Mr. Miller. Your opponent, up to and including this morning, has criticized you for accepting gifts while in office as the Secretary of State. He has said that he will not accept gifts at all in office, although he wouldn't go so far as to say that there should be a blanket rule or policy that prohibits all gifts. First part of the question, do you think that elected officials, constitutional officers should refuse all gifts? And second of all, do you think that should be a blanket policy or up to the individual?
I'm glad that he brought this up because they have spent nearly $1 million in this campaign, these out-of-state groups, trying to completely mischaracterize this issue and lying about it. And I encourage the public to look at the substance of what's been reported. I have gone above and beyond to disclose absolutely everything of value, including things that probably didn't need to be disclosed, because we don't have clear guidance in the statutes as to what needs to be disclosed. The overwhelming majority of the items that I reported as gifts really constitute educational opportunities, even a Department of Defense sponsored trip. One that they've made a big deal out of was a trip up to Aspen. That was in reality sponsored by the Aspen Institute, where they selected 24 of America's top rising stars to study the principles of democracy in an effort to reduce partisanship in this country. It was an educational opportunity. I became a better leader because of it. And I reported that, despite the fact that elected officials across the state don't often do that. The overwhelming majority of the gifts that I reported also are participation in Vistage International, which is the world's largest CEO group. They give me tuition so that every month I can go and sit with business leaders and learn about their issues and try to become a better leader. Charity banquets. These aren't gifts in the traditional sense, but that's why I put them out there. And that's why I've gone above and beyond to try to disclose this. Because at the end of the day, I want the public to be able to make an informed decision as to whether or not they think it has any bearing on my ability to serve. And so I'm disappointed that they continue with these lies and these misrepresentations, because I've fought so hard for transparency. I've done more than any Secretary of State in history to try to disclose absolutely everything, demanding more reports from our elected officials, mandating that there's a single filing office where you can search and categorize these things online. And on the issue of gifts, I've sponsored legislation every cycle to try to put clear definitions in the law as to what is or isn't allowed. It hasn't passed, but despite that fact, I've gone above and beyond and disclosed absolutely everything so that the public can make up their own mind.
To you, Mr. Laxalt, the idea, I guess, that if someone receives a gift, that they may be influenced in their office, is that not obviated by disclosure? Once that gift is disclosed, that the influence thereby is somewhat lessened. So if he has disclosed all his gifts, as he has said, then the law allows the receipt of those gifts, is there really anything there? Is there really any problem?
When I was a JAG in the U.S. Navy, I had to be an ethics officer, and questions were asked all the time. What can service members receive? You can imagine these guys coming back from war. People wanted to buy them things. People wanted to do all this stuff. What was the rule of the Department of Defense? No gifts, period. In fact, a very hard rule to pass on to these guys, 19-year-olds. All people want to do is make their life a little better. Why does the DOD have that kind of a policy? Because receiving gifts, they believe, gives the public the appearance that this office can be bought. And being an officer, enlisted member of the U.S. military, we can never afford to allow the public to think that the military can be bought. It's a very slippery slope, and it's one they've got a very black line for a reason. And I think it should be the same reason for certainly for the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is the top lawyer for the state. We advise state agencies. We're involved with all of these companies. And if I were to accept $70,000 in gifts from all of the primary companies and lobbyists in the state, it would be fair for the public to be concerned that these are all my friends first, and that, why would these people be taking me to boxing matches and to all these events? I mean, Mr. Miller here says that it's mischaracterized. There's nothing mischaracterized. These are gifts. They have been taken, they have been used, and I beg to differ that they aren't important. I want to leave you with a very stark number. From when I looked back, Governor Sandoval took $0 as an Attorney General. Masto has taken less than $1,000 in 8 years combined as a sitting Attorney General. This current governor, as the governor of the state, who I'm sure has just as many educational opportunities as Ross would characterize him as the next guy, correct? He has taken less than $1,000 of gifts in the governor. So I say $70,000 of gifts is just so outside the lines. If it was $500 or $1,000 here and there, so be it. But I've pledged to not take gifts because I think it's important for this office, above all offices, to absolutely never be beholden to special interests in this state. That's something I will do.
Given that, though, given the importance of what you just said, and the rationale behind the DOD policy, why would you not then want that to be a hard and fast rule? Why would you not want that to be a law? And pass a law that says nobody can take gifts if they're elected to office because of the perception or reality that the office can be won.
It's a great question. I will work day one as a pledge as the sitting Attorney General to pass a law, one of my 15 bill drafts that absolutely exempts the Attorney General's office from taking gifts. And I think it's a starting point. Bans. That bans the Attorney General's office from taking gifts. So.
But why not do that for the entire, if it's that important, why not do it for the entire legislature, all constitutional officers, every public official in the state? I'm running for a very serious office. This is my first time running. I believe in the rule that you lead by example. That's something I did as an officer in the U.S. Navy, something I did in Iraq. You had to make sure that you did the right thing. You hope that people will follow. And I think that the best way, rather than to go out there and have a bunch of fighting about this, is me lead by example, set the stage with this office, and in a few years, hopefully a number of other people will start agreeing that this is the way to go. So well, let me ask you first to start off, and I'm sure you'll turn the question to the point you want to make. Should there be a ban on gifts? Should it just be a flat ban on gifts?
Absolutely, there should be a ban on gifts. That's what, in fact, what I proposed last legislative session, which tried to put in the statute a definition of what does or doesn't constitute a gift. We're getting away with this blanket term of using gift. What I put in the statute was to make it clear. Look, educational opportunities paid for by nonprofits aren't gifts. They may, in certain circumstances, still have to be disclosed. But they're not gifts in the traditional sense of the word. If you attend a charitable function, is that a gift? Can you receive it? I proposed legislation that's been in place in many other jurisdictions because we needed clarity. And make no mistake, when Mr. Laxalt talks about the governor not receiving gifts, the Attorney General only receiving 1,000, and his number's way off on that, incidentally, and other elected officials not receiving gifts, that's entirely misleading. There's plenty of ways to hide these items of value if you want to do it from the public's view. You can pay for them with campaign funds. You can just not report them and say, I don't think this is what constitutes a gift. We've seen instances of that just in the last several months. People taking trips to Israel and other places and saying, not reporting it on their gift report. Somebody points it out and they say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and amend that. The reason that the public knows about these items of value that I received is because I went above and beyond and disclosed them. But we have to fix this because this goes directly to the public's confidence in the electoral system and their elected leaders. That's why every legislative session I've made it a priority to fix this problem, to define gifts, to make it absolutely clear who can receive gifts, under what circumstances, and what type of gifts, and how they should be reported. That's the kind of leadership you would expect from me as Attorney General. That's why I've taken the extra step to disclose absolutely everything. And that's why it's so frustrating to listen to these attacks and lies from these dark money groups, these hypocrites who come to this state, run these attack ads with these lies, and themselves refuse to come into compliance with our transparency statutes. They want to run these attacks and themselves not come out and tell us who's funding these attacks. And for him to sit idly by and engage in this and use this as an attack and suggest that there's something wrong with what I'm doing, while at the same time not saying, no, we should bring them out of the shadows and the public should have the right to know, that I think that's absolutely disgusting.
All right, we'll take one question from the audience before we go to the candidates' closing statements, which I'm sure will be lively. And it's from another Steve. Only Steves get to ask questions today. Steve from Fallon, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, gentlemen. Steve Ransom, I'm editor, general manager of Lot Values in Fallon, Nevada. We've met numerous times before. Even though your election, the governor's election, all the other statewide offices are important, I know in the rural counties and what I've read out of the Review Journal and also the Gazette Journal, that education tax, initiative tax is probably the most important thing that is really affecting us right now in terms of if it does pass, for example, it'll be legal, not legal. Many of the unions have now come out against it. Our school board and superintendent have come out against it when it could benefit them, but the way it's been set up, that money can be earmarked for anything according to the legislature. But my question is how do you feel about the tax, and if there's anything, loopholes or whatever it does pass, if it is legal?
Now, Mr. Laxalt, you get to go first.
Yeah, the margins tax is one of the worst ways to do business. We do have an education problem, and unfortunately, I don't think this is going to solve it, and I'm at least personally opposed to it. I do know that a lot of business owners are concerned about the margins tax, and they're worried about the front line 2%. But they're also wondering, there's enough ambiguity in the statute of whether or not it applies to all their subsidiaries and all of this sort of secondary parts of their business. And that's going to be a good avenue for an Attorney General to look very seriously to see if in fact it does apply. And I plan on looking very seriously at that. And and ideally, we try to blunt the force of this margins tax. But I do want to quickly get into.
You got your closing
You want me to
statement.
do it on the closing?
Do that.
Okay.
Margins tax.
One of the things I'm most proud of my tenure as Secretary of State is that I have worked very hard to make sure that I don't put my fingers on the scale of the electoral process, and that includes my oversight over the initiative petition process. I have never taken a position on any initiative petition because this office oversees the fourth branch of government in this entire initiative petition process. So I appoint the ballot committees that write the arguments for both sides. I make the review as to whether or not those ballot arguments have any misleading language in them. I ultimately will certify the election and run it in as fair a manner as possible. And so I have always taken the position that I can't weigh in on the policy for or against any of these items that are right before me. It would be just like a judge telling you his personal opinions about a case that was coming before him. And so I have never taken a position on any of those issues. I can't today either.
All right, so no, abstain. Sorry, gentlemen, the answer is pro. Neither of you guys know. Sorry, okay. All right, we'll do closing statements. We'll do them in the same order. So, Mr. Laxalt, to you first, and then Mr.
Well, I'm very concerned about the conflict of interest, and Mr. Miller just mentioned that he's a champion of watching for conflict of interest. And I want to turn everyone's attention to, keeps pointing to dark money. And when one of these outside groups came in with an attack ad, he responded by saying he was going to pound his fist, shut them down. When asked about the U.S. Constitution and whether he was violating the U.S. Constitution, he said basically he didn't care because he had a bigger agenda that he wanted to push. So what I suggest to you is you make sure you keep his feet to the fire. The Democrat Attorney General Association has recently put out a purchase of $1 million in attack ads against, guess who? Me. And let's make sure that Mr. Miller will be the champion of bipartisanship. He will sue them, call TV stations and tell them to stop running the DAGA ad. Let's make sure he really is this great bipartisan champion of transparency. I also think that as someone that we want to lead as the top lawyer and the top law enforcement officer in the state, for someone that people want to be able to trust, for him to take this gift issue and actually act like that he's now somehow to be emulated because he's reporting all of these gifts and simultaneously try to take down Captain Cortez Masto and Governor Sandoval, frankly, is just shocking to me. He outwardly suggested that they're hiding the gifts and looking for other ways. That would be news to me. I know in both of them, I can't imagine they're quote-unquote hiding gifts. So, I think this is a huge issue for the state. I think it's a huge issue for this race. We all know that my opponent is the candidate of lobbyists. I have no support from lobbyists in Nevada. They do not help me, they do not work for me, and they work for Ross Miller. Why? Because he's been going to dinner with them, going to, as he says, banquets. They're not that a big deal, it's just a charity event. They're going to boxing events, they're going to football games, baseball games. Why do all these special interests want to spend so much time with my opponent? I think that's a big issue. And that's why I pledged to not take gifts. That's why I will fight for this as an Attorney General. And I think it's a very huge deal. I just want to close briefly to say that I think this office is the most important office for this coming few years. The Governor Sandoval needs a partner. And we need to work to make sure that the vulnerable in this state are protected, and we need to make sure that we're working to help protect seniors from fraud and from scams. We need to make sure we're continuing the fight on human trafficking, one of a true scourge of our state. And that's why I'm proud to receive the endorsement of a statewide coalition of sheriffs and DAs that were willing to pick me and say that I am going to be the person that they believe will hold out the best for this job and do the most for Nevada. Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this.
Mr. Miller.
This is a big job, one that I'm ready for, one that I started preparing for as a criminal prosecutor, working aggressively to put the most dangerous criminals in our communities behind bars. Then as Secretary of State, focusing on cracking down on election law violations and administering record fines to members of both parties, working within the Securities Division to make sure that we go after those scams. I'm ready for this job. I have the only experience in this race to be able to get this job done. I am the only candidate that has enforced Nevada law. That's why over 4,000 cops and prosecutors across this state have endorsed my candidacy, because they know that at the end of the day, I'm not going to put personal politics into my decisions. I'm going to protect Nevadans first. And that's in sharp contrast to the stance of my opponent. So I would ask for your public support.
All right, I want to thank both candidates for being willing to do this. Adam Laxalt, Ross Miller, so let's give them a hand.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time that all three of the gentlemen took to answer questions and talk to us about issues that are important to us, and I really appreciate it. And now that you're all fired up about public records, Kelly Scott from the Reno Gazette-Journal and I are going to do a session in about 10 minutes. We'll take a break and be back in here for those of you who want to learn more about public records law and what's going on with it and the future of it. So thanks again to everybody for coming. I appreciate your time. Thank you.